Okay, next order of business is a meeting with Kelly Brown and Jim Barry from DOER to give us a presentation on the Green Communities designation and the adoption of the stretch code. Have a PowerPoint presentation to explain how we could take advantage of this, and I wanted people to see it and see if it made sense for our town. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. I just want to start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak tonight. I know that I have been here many years ago, and it's really nice since I started in this role as a regional coordinator for Central Mass for Green Communities back in 2009 that I'm given the opportunity to come back and give an update on the program, how it's evolved since then, and revisit with you guys this evening, so thank you. This is my colleague, Jim Barry. He's the Western Mass Regional Coordinator, and he's going to walk you through the high-level view of the program and then specifically what we're here to talk about tonight, which is the Stretch Energy Code. So I will hand it off to Jim.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your attention. In 2010, I was the Belchertown Board of Selectmen that volunteered to find out more about the Green Communities Act because I had heard that if you had the perseverance to jump through 5 hoops, there was money at the end of the rainbow, and so everybody said someone should do this, so I volunteered to do it, and I learned a lot about becoming a green community, and so here I am explaining it to others. So I suggest to you, selectmen who volunteer to do certain research and development, to be careful. You know, you could be out doing more than you expected to be doing. So the Green Communities Division was created as part of the Green Communities Act of 2008. The Green Communities Act covered a wide variety of energy topics, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. One of the most critical things that it did that caught my eye as a selectman is it offers grants, not matching grants, but outright grants for energy efficiency projects or renewable projects in municipal-owned buildings if you become a green community. So the short story is, like anything else, you've got to figure out how to jump through the hoops. There are 5 that you have to jump through. It's called 5 criteria. You've met most of them already. I'm not going to talk about them in great detail. I'm happy to talk about any one of the 5 if you wish. Tonight we're focusing primarily on the 5th criteria, but before we get a little bit further, one of the reasons that many MLPs don't get involved with the green communities is in early on stages, it was unavailable to MLPs because they don't pay into Renewable Energy Trust. Since then, we now have 2 paths for MLPs to become green communities. One is to adopt the Renewable Energy Trust, and the other is if you happen to have residents or businesses in town that are served by an investor-owned utility, then the town is eligible to become a green community. So here we are. We're eligible to become a green community. And so there are a number of issues that we can discuss. Right now, we're going to talk a little bit about the money, because if there's no money involved, why would we bother doing this thing? Certainly, as a selectman in Belchertown, I wasn't going to do anything if there was no money at the end of it. So there's a minimum of $125,000 per town. So that's a pretty good deal, regardless of what size you are. And then there's more money based on your population and your income. So the calculation shows that Shrewsbury is estimated to receive about $180,000 on the first grant. So if you submit your paperwork in October and it's all in order, you're eligible to get $180,000 that you can spend on energy efficiency projects, renewable energy projects. When all that money is spent out and the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and paperwork is done and we're all happy that the contract was completed appropriately, every year thereafter you can apply for more money, up to $250,000 per year, for additional energy efficiency projects. So I was just recently in Chicopee that has a lot of work that needs to be done in the schools, and they were going to go out for a multi-million-dollar ESCO project, and they decided to put off that for a bit and do some of the most expensive stuff right away with Green Community designation, and then $250,000 a year every year for 4 years is $1 million. So there is some real money involved that comes from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative proceeds, which Massachusetts is part of. It's not part of the normal budget process. If the governor or legislation decides, you know what, we're going to put this money in the roads instead, well, they can't easily do that. The legislation earmarks the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative proceeds up to $20 million per year for our program. When we first started, we had no idea who would join besides Northampton and Amherst and maybe Cambridge, right? We knew they would join, but who also joined? And over the years, we've had 30, 25, 50 show up, 12 at a time. And lo and behold, we now have 190 of us adopt 185, isn't it?
No, 190 have adopted the stretch code.
Okay, I got the wrong
Making
map.
sure I'm
up there.
paying attention.
Oh, there we go. So 190 have adopted the stretch code, 185 have actually gotten their hands on a bucket of money. The reason there's a disparity is sometimes some towns adopt a stretch code, and then they haven't finished the other 5 criteria yet. So they get put on the map right away as soon as they adopt the stretch code. So it has been pretty successful. This is the last group that we had in October. There was 30 of them. Some of your neighbors may be familiar. So criteria 5 speaks of, the legislation speaks of, all new construction in the state must be more energy efficient than usual, reduce the lifetime energy costs. And when it first came out, people said, how the heck are we going to guarantee that new buildings are going to reduce the life cycle costs? And it turns out that the only way you can really do it is with the building code. That's the only way you can ensure that a building is done the way you want it to be done. And as you may or may not know, the building code changes and evolves over time. And every time it's being evolved, there's always someone pushing it to go further, go further, go further. And other people saying, take it easy now, let's go incremental changes. And so in 2009, when they're getting ready to replace the building code, there was a optional piece of the building code that was a bit more energy efficient. It was a bit of a stretch to get there. So the department decided if you adopted the stretch code, you would meet criteria 5. The basic difference between the stretch code process and a non-stretch code process is a stretch code provides for, I'm reading the bottom line here, performance testing rather than prescriptive testing. What the heck is he talking about? So you go to a doctor and you get a prescriptive, and if you follow it, you'll be all fine. Similarly, in the building code, it's prescriptive. You do R19 in the walls, R36 in the ceiling. The building inspector comes along and says, yep, you followed the prescription. You get your building certificate. Everything's fine. With the stretch code, it's based on performance of the whole building as a unit. So we do modeling of everything, windows, insulation, heating systems, all taken together to see how energy efficient it is. When we first started, there was some misconceptions, some concerns. Early on, a lot of people were saying, I'm not sure I'm ready to do this myself. So I'm going to go over a few of the misconceptions. Early on, it was concerned that the stretch code is new and experimental. Will builders have to learn new stuff? Will builders have to buy new equipment? What is this stretch code thing? Turns out it was not new and experimental even then. It was based on Energy Star for Homes program, which has been around for over 20 years. That's a program where many builders chose to build Energy Star for Homes. Just like we have Energy Star refrigerators or stoves, we have Energy Star for Homes. And this process that proves that the home actually is energy efficient, this Energy Star process, they adopted to be the stretch code, which blew my mind. They didn't invent a brand new program. They used an existing program. That was pretty cool. Another misconception was that it would require tight and healthy homes, because one of the things we're trying to do is reduce airflow, right? We don't want all the heat blowing out near the doors and windows. And so there was some concern about would it be too tight. Many, many years ago, when we had our first energy crisis, and I know you're not old enough to remember when you could only buy gas on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday if your license plate ended in an odd number, and Tuesday and Thursday if it ended in an even number.
Some of us are
Some
old
of us
enough.
I remember. So some builders said, what we're going to do is we're going to put plastic under the sheetrock. That'll keep the air out. Well, that turned out to be not a good idea. Plastic is not a good thing for moisture barrier. But since then, in these 20 years, we've had better materials invented, Tyvek, et cetera. We've had better techniques to use. So no longer can we say that we can say today easily that you can have a tight home, a very airtight home, and it will not be unhealthy or leaky or moldy. One of the biggest concerns people had when it first came out was people who were concerned about, I'm going to be required to update my existing home, similar to the Title V septic system. So I'm not sure how many of you have septic systems versus sewers. Out where I lived, were primarily septic systems, and if you sell your home, you have to have it inspected to make sure it meets the current code. So there was some background concern that, well, wait a minute, are they going to do the same thing with energy? Are they going to require that I update my home? The answer is no. That's never been the case, that you would have to update an existing home. And in fact, the current version of the stretch code, which just went into effect in January, that I'll talk a little bit more about as we go on, but the key point of the newest stretch code is it only applies to new residential construction and or new commercial construction that's more than 100,000 square feet. Now, that's not new residential construction over 100,000 square feet. It's any new residential construction and any new commercial construction over 100,000 square feet. explicitly exempts additions, renovations, and repairs from the stretch code. The previous version of the stretch code did have some language in there that did affect additions and renovations. There were some people saying, wait a minute, now I already built the home. I just want to put an addition on. What are you doing to me? So when they revised the stretch code in January, they dropped that part of it completely. And in fact, the stretch code today is no longer much of a stretch. I mentioned that back in 2010, it really was an iteration. It was more expensive to build a stretch code home than a non-stretch code home. There was more work involved for the building inspector, more work involved for the builder. But every year, every 3 years, the building code evolves, and the building code caught up to the stretch code. The stretch code stayed flat. So in July of 2014, a new base code was done, a new non-stretch code was done that almost caught up with the stretch code. So your existing town, using this existing code and the brand new code, there's very little difference between building it to the stretch code and building it to a non-stretch code. And in fact, January 1 of 2017, there's a new base code and a new stretch code. The basic difference between the two is the stretch code requires the use of a home energy rating services expert to make sure that the home is in fact energy efficient. That's the Energy Star for Homes process. I'm going to talk about a little bit more detail. There is a difference in cost. It costs more. So just as a builder would have to have a plumbing subcontractor or electrical subcontractor, now the builder is going to have to find a home energy rating services expert to be a subcontractor to help look at the design of the home before the building permit is billed, to do some of the inspections as the home is being built, and to do some final inspections. I mentioned there's an extra cost there, and we also mentioned at this time that in investor-owned utility towns that have Mass Save program, the Mass Save program covers most of that extra cost. And I will say that even in an MLP town such as yourself, if the home is being built with natural gas, and there's a natural gas pipeline, the natural gas is an investor-owned utility, and you are therefore eligible to the new residential construction rebates and incentives. So if you're building a home, even in an MLP territory, in a natural gas area, you have access to all of these rebates. So what does it apply to? It does not apply to plumbing. It does not apply to engineering. It does not apply to electrical. It applies simply to the parts of the house that have to do with energy, namely insulation, doors, windows, appliances, etc. And the process includes this home energy rating services expert that's going to be involved. It starts with a modeling system. You go to a home energy rating services expert with your building plan. They sit in front of a computer and they say, how big a house are you going to build? 2,000 square feet. 1 story or 2 story? 2 story. Which, is it facing south or north? It's facing kind of northeast. What kind of windows do you plan on building? Well, we're going to put in U32 specials. What kind of insulation do you plan on? They go through this whole list of things of the design aspects that relate to energy in the house, and the computer is comparing it to the old code and is starting to measure it to see how energy efficient it is. And this thermometer starts dropping. So the more energy efficient things that you're doing that are better than the base home of 2006, the lower the thermostat goes. And the idea is you have a choice between spending more money on windows perhaps and less on insulation, or more on insulation and less on windows, or maybe the heating system. So there's a variety of ways to get to this performance as opposed to following the prescriptive, point A, point B, point C. And in the middle of the building, the home energy rating services inspector will come out and inspect the home as it's being built. The building inspector does not have to do this, although 99% of them will show up anyway because they want to see what's going on, and they're used to inspecting the house. They're going to go out there and look at the insulation anyway. And there's a final inspection, at the end of which you're going to get a score, a numerical score, that you can then use when you're selling your home. You can say, if Kelly and I are both selling a house, and I say, my house is a 40 and hers is a 50, my house is a more energy efficient house, I might be able to get a little bit more money for it. And it's a score that you get from an expert, outside, independent, objective. Similar to MPGs in a car, it's an MPG for the house. Again, looking at the people who have done it, 190 have said yes so far. People always want to say, yeah, but what's the real cost? Come on, you're telling me it doesn't cost much. What's the real cost? So here's an example, and we have a variety of examples. I'm not going to go through all of them tonight, but here's an example of a 2,200 square foot house, 3 bedrooms, in the Worcester area. It's currently heated with electric heat because, this is natural gas, And the base code, if you just built it to standard building code, the number on that thermometer would be a 62. We're trying to get down to a 55 to meet the stretch code. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things you have to do that's different to build a home to stretch code versus not stretch code. So on the left-hand side are the items that people would have done in general, just to make the standard building code, the prescriptive path. And the items in blue on the left-hand column have been switched out to the items over here in the upper right-hand corner. So this is the extra cost that it takes to make these things a little bit better, to get that thermometer down a little bit more. So the first extra cost for a stretch code home is the Home Energy Rating Service Expert price. So that's $1,300 to hire this expert. In addition, they went to a much better furnace, from a 92% furnace to a 96% furnace. That costs a little bit more money. And the domestic hot water system, they spent an extra $92 to get a slightly better hot water heating system that lowered that thermometer a little bit. They went in 100% LED lighting. The code only calls for 75% high efficiency lighting. They get 100% LED lighting. Those are usually at no cost. The total cost to build the stretch code home better than a regular home was $2,000. But these incentives, if you're a natural gas customer and you're getting the natural gas rebates, it was $750 to help offset the price of the HERS rater and additional pricing per piece of equipment. So the total rebate for this particular home in this particular scenario is $2,000. The extra cost was $2,000 to build and broke even. So we have multiple cost-benefit analysis of different sizes, different heating systems that I'm happy to go through in greater detail. But based on the clock, I'm going to...
Yep, and just to clarify, so for this particular example, looking at like a community like Shrewsbury, all of the incentives listed on here, if it was a natural gas home, would apply except for probably the LED lights. That's the only one that would maybe, which is a couple $100, that wouldn't be maybe applicable to Shrewsbury.
I'm not sure how much commercial building we're going to be having in town over 100,000 square feet, but there is some requirements for that. 10% above ASHRAE 90.1-2013. Those are something that engineers and designers of these large commercial buildings are completely familiar with, and they don't break a sweat over these things. There are some commercial incentives also if it was a natural gas building. And we got to the tail end. Just about in time.
Pretty quick.
Wow.
I have a question. What if you're an oil customer?
Sure. So we have prices. Oop, oh no, I hit the wrong button. Come back. I'm going down already. Oh, the other down. Should put my glasses on.
So we have electric heat, and then we have propane. We don't have, propane is generally the one that we do have an analysis on, just because it's a more high-efficient heating system, which we use usually when a community is looking the comparable of oil or propane.
It's difficult to meet the stretch code with oil because of the energy efficiency of the oil burners. If you can get to high 80s, you're doing well, but with propane, you get to 92, 94. So the higher the efficiency of the equipment, the more that thermometer drops. If you're going to put in an oil heating system, you'd probably have to do extra on windows and insulation to make the thermometer drop in a different way. But it's not impossible, but it's difficult.
So this is for new house. I was thinking of people who wanted to apply and renovate their house or something like that.
If you're going to buy and renovate a house, this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. There are still, I mean, on the, there could be, on the oil side, there isn't incentives either. Obviously, being with the oil market, that's not part of Mass Save. It's usually just gas or electric.
Yes.
So what you're saying is if you're building a new home that's going to be by oil heat, how do you achieve the stretch code then? How is that possible?
So, well, sitting with the Home Energy Rating Services expert, and you're putting in the design of the building, if you're going to stick with that oil furnace, you're going to get the most energy efficient oil furnace you can get. See where that thermometer ends up, then say, okay, so now what else do we have to do? Do we have to get slightly better windows maybe? Do we have to maybe use smaller windows in the north and different kinds of windows in the south? Do we have to do the overhangs in the south to keep the sun off in the summer? There's a whole variety of things that the expert will suggest to you to help drop that thermometer in different ways than simply the heating system.
And what would that cost? What would those additional add-ons cost?
I'm sorry, I haven't got that number.
So if it's $2,000 to achieve the stretch code with natural gas, it would have to be $2,000 plus for oil?
So in general, it's $1,200 more just for a home energy rating services expert. So we're at $1,200 regardless of what kind of fuel we're using. Okay? And then there's additional cost to do those items that would lower that thermometer, whether it's a heating system, whether it's a domestic hot water system, whether it's better glass.
So could we say $4,000 or $5,000?
Oh, no, I would not say
No.
that, sir. No, sir, I would, no.
So if you
I've
look-
not seen any examples that are more than $2,500.
For an oil?
I had not seen an oil heating system, sir.
Okay, so we don't know.
That's correct.
So if the board were to pursue this, and someone were to ask at town meeting, what would it cost?
We'll get the number before town meeting.
Yeah.
How's that?
We can look into it. So we have it on propane, which was 2,000, and then we have it on natural gas, which is around 2,000. So it probably wouldn't be as much as what you're saying. He doesn't want to give you an exact
Okay.
number without
And
running it. And the majority of that total cost is really related to the HERS rater, is what he's saying. It's not as much to the heating system.
Right.
He was just explaining the reason we have it analysis on propane is because the fact you can get a little higher of efficiency, it requires less trade-off, so that's what we've seen more people do. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't make
So what
sense to
you're
have.
saying is a person, the town were to adopt the stretch code, because not all the town of Shrewsbury doesn't have access to natural
Yep.
gas. So if this were to be pursued, then new homes being constructed to be serviced outside of natural gas would then have to be encouraged to go to propane?
Nope.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Nope, I would be curious to know, actually, if you wanted us to look into it, I'd be curious to hear how houses are being built. Are they choosing propane, are they choosing oil, just so that we have that information a little bit?
Well, I think they're choosing natural gas when they have access to it.
But when they don't,
Or propane.
yeah.
In the stretch code community, so out west where I live, many towns, many new homes are being built with propane because of the efficiency of the heating system.
So in Shrewsbury, if they didn't have access to natural gas, are you guys aware if they're choosing propane, or are they choosing oil, or is it a mix?
Some are using propane. I know no one in town using propane.
It might be a question for the building inspector.
I'll make
Check
an
with the building
inquiry.
inspector.
We'll let
Yeah,
you know.
that would be good, and then we can look into
Sure, we'll let you know.
some cost information.
Ms. Miller, do you have a question?
Yeah, so forgive me, you may have covered it, and I just missed it in the whole thing. So what is the target goal? So while I'm
Oh, sorry.
making these
Yep,
decisions and
55, sorry.
we're trying to get to 55,
Yep,
that's the target?
Yep.
Per home, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Every home gets scored.
And if this were adopted in town, then it would apply to every new home, including those who are oil. So what you're saying is, so because it's a sort of this systemic performance-based,
Yes.
right, that they would make decisions on other items,
Yep.
because, okay, all right. I just want
Exactly
to make
right.
sure that I'm understanding it,
Yep.
sort of what the cost implications are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just as a reference, I mean, the map you see up there for the 190 communities, there's a lot of communities in Central Mass that have been building homes with oil heat over the last 5 years. So it's obviously very doable to be able to do that. We just didn't have the exact cost tonight.
May I do a follow-up? So what happens if this is adopted and we don't meet? So it must be an average, right? I mean, you must have to figure out, like, if we build 100 homes and,
So
you know,
every
a certain percentage doesn't meet 55 or better, what happens?
So every individual home, before you get a building permit from the building inspector, you have to first go to a home energy rating services expert, design the home, get a piece of paper out of the computer that says, this is the home we expect to build, and we expect the result to be a 55 or 54,
Has to,
whatever.
planning.
That has to happen before you get your building permit.
Yeah, okay, so it's.
And then
part of
this expert helps inspect while the house is being built, make sure its air sealing is done well, make sure the insulation is done well. You didn't just hire my son on summer vacation to staple up some bats of insulation between 2x4s. No, you're gonna make sure the insulation is done very well. All 6 sides are touching, so there's no air blockage in there. They're gonna look at the installation of the heating system, the hot water system. So this is an energy services expert. This is all that person does. They're gonna help design the house, inspect it, and at the tail end, verify it to make sure that what we said we were going to build in terms of the quality of the windows, the system, heating system, check it off, make sure it really, and verifies it. Because that's another piece of paper that goes to the building inspector before a certificate of occupancy can be given.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. How does this apply to multifamily, from a duplex up to an apartment building?
So residential buildings up to 4 stories, new residential construction, 4 stories or less, each unit must comply with the stretch code. So a duplex, both units would have to comply. if you go above 4 stories, then we're talking commercial code. Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up? Sure. A concern I had several years ago was that there seemed to be a pay-to-play scenario whereby a municipal light company had to pay quite an assessment to
Yeah.
get in because our electric bill in our case was not paying into this. Now, as a gas customer, I think I was paying into it, correct?
The gas company is not paying into the
Just in
REG.
the electric.
Then how do we get around that pay-to-pay entry fee in Shrewsbury?
Yep. So back in 2012, it was brought to our attention that there was another community in a different region that was looking to become a green community, and brought it to the attention of the program that they had multiple residents in that community that did have that was serviced by a municipal light plant, that was also had residents serviced by an investor-owned utility. And so at that time, we took it upon putting out a request for information to find out how many communities this was the case with, and then also getting a buy-in if this meant those residents were paying into it, if we should allow, if a municipal light plant community can document that they have residents served by an investor-owned utility, to come in that path. And so I think if you want to go to slide 3, to date, in my region, I've had the towns of Littleton, Stowe, I think he mentioned Chicopee, Westfield, Lakeville, Belmont, Concord. They've all come in that process. So I've already gotten a couple customers that Shrewsbury has, and I've passed them over to National Grid to verify that they are serviced by National Grid. That's in the works right now. National Grid would provide a letter, and that would be the process to Shrewsbury coming in.
Is there a minimum number?
Yeah, 1.
One.
Okay, that seems rather minimal.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what to do. If we
Yeah.
picked 50, somebody said, well, I got 49.
Yeah.
So we said 40, well, I got 30. So,
Yep. And this has been going on since 2012.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a process question. So the first step is to adopt the stretch code, because if you don't do that, you don't go anywhere, right?
Yep.
And then you got to meet all of these 5 criteria?
Yes.
But we're almost all the way there already.
Yeah,
At
so
least 3, I think.
Yeah, so criteria 1 is zoning related, and I'd previously met with Dan a few months ago, and I did look at your zoning, and it looked like that wouldn't be an issue. And then for criteria 3, the energy reduction plan, and then the fuel efficient vehicle policy, they're not too big a lifts. And also I work hand in hand with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission that's helped a lot of communities in the area put together these documents, and then as part of the package as well, if the community would like to do it.
Actually, the director of Central Mass Regional Planning at MMA was the one who told me about that one-house exception.
Yep.
And that's why I came back over to the booth, because I knew that things had changed. But it is much different, from our point of view, I think, than what it was when it first came out. I think it makes it much more doable and much more feasible for us. So we go through, we do the stretch code.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question?
Yes.
Who defines and what is a fuel-efficient vehicle?
So I think this is the exact language, I should say, that's out of the statute. So we took the language and obviously implemented it. So what the process would really be is putting forth a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. Just to clarify, criteria 3, the energy reduction plan, and the fuel-efficient vehicle policy would come before the Board of Selectmen as a part of the process for adoption. The policy really looks at the type of use for each vehicle. So it's a mile per gallon rating that's in the guidance, and it looks at sport utility vehicle versus compact car versus, so for an example, our policy that's in place right now, a 2012 Ford Explorer would meet the policy as it's in place right now. So it really just for that sport utility vehicle. But if you're going to purchase a compact car, you'd have to have a higher mile per gallon rating.
and if it's over 8,500 pounds, if you're buying snow plows, we do not require you to put a snow plow in a Prius. Not required.
Yep. And
Fire trucks are exempt, snow plows are exempt, dump trucks are exempt,
Emergency
ambulances are exempt,
responses.
police cruisers are exempt. So it's those cars that we give to the selectmen after 10 years of service.
Yeah, right.
No, you guys don't get those?
We don't
we'll
even
have
get the
no
little matchbox.
problem, yeah.
So just
Yeah.
going back to the process, so we pass the stretch code, we go through this, submit, it must be certified,
Yep.
I would imagine.
Yep, the applications are usually due generally the end of October, early November, when a community would submit showing that they meet the 5 criteria, and then that's when, we'd review it, be designated, and then you come in and kind of show us how that 180,000 is basically, once you designate, set aside, and then Shrewsbury would tell us how they'd want to spend the money, depending on, obviously under energy efficiency improvements, but at what buildings and so that communities use it for. And part of putting together the energy reduction plan and showing how the community would reduce its usage by 20% is getting those reports that usually identify how the community would want to spend the funds.
So-
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So you're not looking this way, so I
Sorry.
have to kind of get you to look over this way. Mr. Barry, I applaud your enthusiasm, all right? And I think you've done a great job of explaining the program. So thank you very much for that. And I would hope we could find a way to make this work, because I don't think it's too much of a stretch based on where we are now. My question, outside of the patting you on the back, though, is to say, I've worked in industry, and I was a big proponent of LEEDS projects and the like. It seems like every few years, though, there's a different program with a different acronym and a different thing. Is this coalesced now to a fairly steady state in that this is the program going forward? It's going to stay here for 6, 7, 8 years and not morph into something else, or that we're going to have too many other changes? I know it's hard to predict these things, but I'm saying, as a person who lived through an evolution, the LEEDS program was so onerous. When we first started, we didn't want to do it. Then when we had some success, we wanted to do it more. The truth is, the more you pat people on the back and tell them they're doing a good job, and they want to do more of it. So I'd hope that we learn from this and keep doing those similar kinds of things, and make communities want to do this, not make them do this. So it's just a comment.
Anyone else? Mr. LaBelle?
So you established with us the costs associated with the home energy rating system consultant. What's it going to cost the builder in time, that process? That the step that they're going to have to take to consult with this individual. Is that a day? Is that a week? What are we talking about?
So I guess it would depend on the builder and the level of experience. So when we first started this process, there was a learning curve for some of the builders who had learned to build a home from Grandpa and Uncle Charlie. Some of the builders who had already been building Energy Star for homes knew what was going on. So in the very beginning, some folks were saying, now how do I do this? But the standard building code has caught up with it in terms of it requires blower door tests, whether you're a stretch code community or not, duct blaster tests, whether you're a stretch code community or not, super well done installation of the insulation to be inspected carefully by the building inspector. That has to be done anyway. So most of your builders are already building to a higher quality standard than they had been. The additional cost of going to a home energy rating services expert the first time, I don't know about the first time, but I suspect that by the second or third time, they've got a plan down that they know what the heck they're doing. How much does it cost extra? I couldn't tell you.
No, I was just thinking, the time.
I think it, so my, you know, I'm going to tell the story eventually. Praise the Lord, my daughter and her husband and 2 children are no longer living with me. They moved into the house that they built next door, which is a stretch code home. They needed a HERS rater. It took 2 visits with the builder and my daughter and her husband to work through the model, the plan, to get the certificate, the information they needed to go to the building inspector. Took them a couple days. Now, is that average or not? If she's anything like her mother, it might have taken longer.
Now, how about the availability of these folk? Is there
Fair point. So
sufficient?
early on, there was a concern about that, and there was a concern, as there were enough of them, because primarily they were servicing Energy Star for home builders, and that was like 15, 17% of the houses built were Energy Star built homes. Since then, many of these home rating energy services companies have hired more people. So I've been told that the stress of finding one is substantially less than it was 8 years ago. Is it a 0? I don't know. It depends again where you're living. Are we close to Worcester? We're close to Worcester, right?
Right next door.
So that's.
Yep, you have a couple big companies right in Westboro that have quite a few. Clear Results has a lot.
So you'll have an easier time than Egremont or Adams.
Okay. Thank you very much, and great presentation, by the way.
I just, one last question. So with the exception of adopting the stretch code and coming up with these 2 plans we need for the fuel, we don't have any other administrative costs. We don't need another department or anything to enforce this.
No.
We're not going to have to add anybody to the building department.
Nada.
Nope.
Assuming we're adequately staffed now, but it's not nothing that. Okay.
Correct. And any assistance you needed, like I said, you already talked to Janet, so there's also other assistance through other agencies to even helping you come in.
We've been providing grants to the RPAs on your behalf to, so they can spend their money, they can spend our money, it's all our money, right? To assist you with both becoming a green community and following on to that in terms of keeping the paperwork up so you can stay a green community, procurement for future green community projects, grant applications for future green community grant applications. So we've learned, I mean, first year, we were saying, a lot of small towns, I'm out in Western Mass, a lot of small towns say, I don't have anybody to do this. So often it was volunteers, energy community people, doing the work to become a green community and doing the follow-up work. Now, they're still doing some of it, but they had some professional help from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission or.
My final question, item 3. Practical review and understanding. Where would one get a scope of, and to fully understand exactly what that would require for a community of our size?
Yeah, so what you would do is we would work with, so vendors that would come out. That's what the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission has been helping a lot of communities do. We have what's called Mass Energy Insight. It's a free web-based energy management tool. It's been around since 2010. The first thing that they've helped communities do is getting set up on Mass Energy Insight, having all your data in one place. You can see how much you consume over all your municipal buildings, street and traffic light, and vehicles. And then the next step would be having those reports down where they look at your different facilities. I know you guys have in the past taken advantage of some of our programs, the energy efficiency conservation block grants, and done some energy management systems in a couple of your schools that we paid for. We would look at having someone come out. We'd have to work with you on getting some reports done that could show what can be done through the municipal buildings and your schools that would show that 20% reduction.
So you have experts walking through your buildings, making a list of things that were doable, and do a cost-benefit analysis on those things so you can prioritize them. Which ones should we do? Which ones can we wait? Which ones we spend our money on immediately? Which ones do we wait till following year to do it?
And that's that 5-year plan. And then generally, that's what really dictates a lot of the time what you're going to come in for funding for.
It makes sense. It blew my mind when I was hearing this. Wait a minute, they're going to give me money to save, and they're going to help me figure out how to spend it? What? And year after year after year, we're saving money. I'm telling you, in Belchertown, we're saving $120,000 a year just in electricity.
And they came in 2010,
that's real money.
so at the beginning.
So you indicate to us that it requires town meeting action to adopt the stretch code.
Yes, sir.
But now to apply to join, to become a green community, is that
Just
Board of
you-
Selectmen action?
Yes.
Yep.
Unless you have questions.
So let me just review where we were and where we are today. So, no renewable energy charge that we're going to charge our customers.
Nope, you have 2 customers. If we can verify it, my understanding, that's the way that you guys would proceed. So that's in the process.
Only now affects new construction, not additions, renovations, or repairs. Again, that's a change from previously.
Correct.
The stretch is not so stretch as of January 1.
Correct.
And if you're a natural gas customer, the rebates will pretty much offset the additional costs for doing the work.
Yes, sir.
If you're an oil customer, you're going to be paying money out of your pocket.
Yes, sir.
Propane is also covered under
Yep.
that, right?
No, propane and, in this case, oil would be the same. You'd be paying.
Right, propane and
Yep.
oil. So if you're not heating with natural gas,
You don't
wouldn't
get the
qualify
rebates.
for the mass
you don't get the
Rebate on
rebate, so this
propane.
will cost you more money.
Yep. But we can show you the math where the amount that you're saving per year in energy offsets the increased cost of the mortgage. So if you're going to put an extra $3,000 on a 30-year mortgage at 6%, the dollar that you're going to pay per year for increase for that mortgage is more than offset by the energy you're saving.
Okay, I just want to.
No, that's
I
fair.
like to put things in very neat categories.
That's fair.
Cost more, cost less,
Yep.
dollar signs.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Thank you, that was it.
Good, thank you for the
Are
presentation,
you from
appreciate it.
the Gary Woodlock School of Belgium?
Oh, Jerry, come on. He was a great man.
Are you before or after?
I'm much younger than.